There's a conflict escalating on our streets, and it's not a simple one. We're seeing public displays of faith being met with really deliberate acts of provocation, and it's pushing the very boundaries of what we consider free speech versus what we need for public safety. This is a story about where those lines are drawn, and more importantly, what happens when they're crossed. To understand just how real this gets, you have to start right here. This was July 25th, 2021, at London's famous Speaker's Corner. A Christian preacher named Hatun Tash was attacked mid-sermon. She was stabbed in the face and in the hand. I mean, we're not talking about a simple debate over ideas here. This was a violent physical confrontation. And it's a really stark entry point into this much, much wider story. All right, to really get a grip on this, we're going to break it down into 4 parts. First, who is this preacher at the very center of the storm? Second, what is the specific religious idea that's being used as a flashpoint? Third, how does that belief jump from an ancient text to a modern street fight? And finally, what does all of this mean for the future of free speech? Okay, so let's dive into that first part and talk about the central figure in this whole incident, Hatun Tash. Who is she, and what is it that drives her to preach in one of London's most famous, and let's be honest, most contentious, public spaces? Okay, so her background is absolutely key to understanding all of this. Hatun Tash is an ex-Muslim who converted to Christianity. She runs a ministry called Defend Christ, Critique Islam, and she's a regular fixture at Speaker's Corner, where she gets right into debating the Quran. Now, this work has made her a target. She's faced repeated threats, physical assaults, and she's even been arrested by the police right in the middle of these confrontations. So how does she see her own actions? Well, in her own words, she doesn't frame it as incitement. She sees it as debate. She says, "I am convinced I have not broken any law or incited hate. All I did was question Islam." This really gets to the heart of it for her. She sees herself as a preacher, operating within the law, simply challenging ideas, not people. And in the aftermath of the attacks, you see this powerful story of resilience start to form around her. People use words like stabbed, robbed, strip-searched to paint this picture of someone who is just unbreakable, a lioness. The message is one of pure defiance. You can threaten her, you can attack her, but you are not going to silence her. But, her story is really just one side of the coin. To understand the counter-protests she faces and why they take the form they do, we need to shift gears a bit. We need to look away from the person and zoom in on the specific ideas that are acting as a trigger for these confrontations. And this is the key question, right? Because the tactics being used by some of these activists, they aren't just random. They are directly referencing very specific Islamic texts. So what exactly is that reference? This is it. This is the line. It comes from a hadith, which is a collection of sayings attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, and it has become a tool of provocation. The text states that a prayer can be nullified, essentially canceled out, if a dog, a donkey, or a woman passes in front of the person praying. But, and this is so important, this isn't some uncontested line, even within the text itself. Right after that statement, Aisha, one of the Prophet's wives, is quoted as pushing back hard. She says, "You have made us dogs." So this highlights that there's a debate, a complexity, that exists right there in the foundational scripture.
So you've got this centuries-old theological point, complete with its own internal debate. How on earth does that transform into a modern-day street confrontation? Well, this is where the story takes a really sharp turn.
This is where it gets real. That scripture, it's not just for discussion anymore. It's being actively weaponized. Activists are taking this specific hadith and turning it into a real-world tactic to use during public prayers.
And don't just take my word for it. The strategy is laid out clear as day. Here, in a live stream, you can hear an activist literally coaching his audience on exactly how to do it. Use the hadith to disrupt public Muslim prayers by just bringing a woman or a dog nearby.
And this isn't just about some clever, passive protest, The actions on the street are being matched by a serious escalation in language online. The rhetoric is just becoming more and more confrontational. And here's a perfect example of that shift. The language moves way beyond a theological critique and into just pure hostility. The statement isn't just about the dog nullifying a prayer. It's about setting up this hierarchy of affection versus despise. It's personal. And then it goes even further. This is where it crosses a really dangerous line. From aggressive language to flat-out, unambiguous threats of violence. The rhetoric has moved so far beyond debate, it's now direct physical intimidation. And that really shows just how dangerous this whole flashpoint has become. So, when you see all of this playing out, the preaching, the violence, the provocative protests, the threats, it forces us to step back and ask a much larger, more fundamental question about the kind of society we live in. Where are the boundaries here?
What you're really seeing here is a head-on collision between two huge ideas. On one side, you have this core principle of free expression, the right to preach, to question, to critique religion. But on the other side, you have the absolute necessity of maintaining public order and, keeping people safe. These incidents force those two core values into a direct and really uncomfortable conflict.
And so this leaves us with the central, unresolved dilemma. It's the big question, isn't it? At what point does critiquing a religion or disrupting a prayer cross that invisible line from protected, even if it's offensive, speech to illegal, unprotected public incitement? There's no easy answer here, and it's a question these confrontations are forcing all of us to face.